Gravity Falls is full of a ton of fun characters and supernatural adventures, and today I'm going to be making custom Magic the Gathering cards based on it. First, of course, is the two protagonists of Gravity Falls, Dipper and Mabel. For Dipper, I made the card Dipper, Anxious Investigator, a 2/3 legendary human for 1 white and a blue, with Partner with Mabel, Sweater Savant, and whenever a non-human creature enters the battlefield, you may tap Dipper, Anxious Investigator. If you do, investigate. And clues you control have pay 2, sacrifice this artifact, scry 2, then draw a card. And for Mabel, I made Mabel, Sweater Savant, a 3/2 legendary human for 1 red and a green with Partner with Dipper, Anxious Investigator, and whenever Mabel, Sweater Savant enters the battlefield, create Waddles, a legendary 1/1 green boar creature token. And she has, if an effect would put 1 or more stickers on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many stickers on that permanent instead. To start out with, I had to give both of them partners since everybody raked me over their coals for not giving Jake and Finn partner in my last video. But I think also it makes a lot of sense here since of course the two are twins and often work together on the adventures they go on. Out of the two, Dipper is by far the more curious one, and he's often trying to figure out the mysteries of Gravity Falls with the journal that he finds in the first episode. So a common plotline in Gravity Falls is there's some kind of monster or supernatural event that appears and Dipper has to look through the journal and try and figure out and investigate some way to defeat the monster. So for his Magic the Gathering card, I wanted to show this idea by making it whenever a non-human creature enters the battlefield, i.e. representing a monster that we see in an episode of Gravity Falls, you can tap Dipper to investigate. The idea being that he's looking through the journal for some kind of solution to the monster problem you run into. Then, since the journal does give him an additional level of knowledge about the monster, I wanted to make it so the clue token that you get off of investigating from Dipper is more powerful than your average clue token, now letting you preordain when you crack your clue token rather than just drawing a card. If you wanted to use Dipper, I think he works really good with untappers that are also non-human creatures, so you're able to trigger his first ability but then also untap him so you can trigger it for other additional non-human creatures. So stuff like Hiora's Follower, Tidal Force, or Fate Stitcher. He also works pretty good with mass untappers so that you can take advantage of Dipper triggering off of your opponent's creatures. So stuff like Mercfiend Liege, Seedborn Muse, or Drum Bellower. You could also lean more into a clue synergy direction, running cards like Erdwall Innkeeper that allows you to investigate twice with him. Then you also have Academy Manufactor, which allows you to a bonus food and treasure token. Then there's also Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, that lets you tap your clues for mana. Luckily, Dipper also works decently well with Mabel, Sweater Savant, since when Mabel enters the battlefield, she makes Waddles, a legendary boar creature token. And notably, Waddles is not a human, so him entering the battlefield will allow you to trigger Dipper's ability quite easily. Waddles, of course, being Mabel's adorable pet pig that I had to throw onto her card. For Mabel's design, she has an absolute love of arts and crafts, and to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made her synergize incredibly well with the sticker mechanic that we saw from Unfinity, essentially acting as a doubling season for your stickers. So if you wanted to use her, she works really good with cards that care about stickers that you put onto them, like Make a Blank Splash, Tuscan Whiskers, or Blank Balls of Fire. Next we have Soos, Mystery Shack Staff, a 4/4 legendary creature human employee for 2 red and a white with Vigilance, and when Soos, Mystery Shack Staff enters the battlefield, support 2, and then red and tap, return target artifact card that was put into your graveyard this turn to the battlefield tapped. Soos is one of the most loyal and hardworking employees you'll ever see at the Mystery Shack, and he serves as a great friend to Mabel and Dipper throughout their time in Gravity Falls, helping them go on adventures and helping them just get used to living in Gravity Falls, Oregon. In Magic the Gathering, I wanted to represent his diligence of being a hard worker by giving him Vigilance. And then one other aspect about Soos's work is that we often see him fixing and repairing things all around the shack. And to represent this ability in Magic the Gathering, I made it so he cares about artifacts and notably bringing them back from the graveyard. The idea being that some part of the shack is broken, i.e. an artifact, and that him returning it from the graveyard is him fixing it. Additionally, I also gave him support too, as a way to represent him being a supportive friend to the Pines twins in their investigations and adapting to life in Gravity Falls in general. If you want to build around Soos, you're most likely to lean into his ability to return artifacts from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you're going to want to run a few ways of getting artifacts into your yard. You can do it with wheel spells like Magus the Wheel, Reforge the Soul, or Wheel of Misfortune. Or you could try and mill the artifacts into your yard with effects like Altar of Dementia, Mesmeric Orb, or Codex Shredder. And of course, if you're going to run all of these strategies, you're going to actually want to run a lot of big artifacts for you to return to the battlefield. So stuff like Metalwork Colossus, Portal to Phyrexia, or Cityscape Lover would go great with him. Along with making cards for some of the most iconic characters, I also thought it would be really fun for Gravity Falls to make some cards designed on some of their iconic episodes. The first I made was the Inconveniencing, an enchantment for 3 white with, when it enters the battlefield, exile all creatures with total power and toughness greater than 12 until the Inconveniencing leaves the battlefield. And whenever a creature's total power and toughness becomes greater than 12, exile it. In the episode with the same name, Dipper, Mabel, Wendy, and Wendy's friends all go to an abandoned convenience store that is supposed to be haunted. The ghost haunting the store specifically has a vengeance for teenagers, and in the episode, one by one, Wendy's friends are all getting picked off by acting like teenagers. To represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so when the Inconveniencing enters the battlefield, you exile all creatures that have a power and toughness greater than 12, or exiling a creature whenever their power and toughness exceeds 12. The idea being that you're basically exiling anything that is a quote-unquote teenager. However, they are only exiled until the Inconveniencing leaves the battlefield, since as we see in the episode, once the 2 ghosts are defeated, all of Wendy's friends are freed from their grasp. I think this card is a great top-down design for the theme of the episode, but it's definitely a bit harder to use than a traditional board wipe due to its somewhat clunky restriction. However, an interesting use of this card is the second clause, which exiles creatures if their total power and toughness ever goes over 12. So you could build some kind of deck where you're trying to pump your opponent's creatures so they go over this threshold as a way to remove them. So you could run stuff like Giant Growth to give an opponent's creature a lot of power and toughness at instant speed for very cheap. You could run repeated effects with stuff like Glunch the Bestower, or you could do something like Kenrith the Return King, where you're able to put a lot of +1/+1 counters based on how much mana you have, and you can do it multiple times in one turn. I also made a card based on the episode Double Dipper. In the episode, the Mystery Shack is throwing a party, and Dipper uses this to try and get closer to Wendy. However, Dipper's plans don't work as intended, and to try and adapt, he uses the cloning copy machine to make more copies of himself. So I designed the card, the Cloning Copy Machine, an artifact for 6 blue with, at the beginning of each upkeep, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except the token isn't legendary if that creature is legendary, and has, when this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. The cloning machine, of course, makes copies of your creatures, and I specifically allowed you to copy legendary creatures since in the episode Dipper uses it to clone himself, and I feel like it would be a little bit of a flavor fell if you weren't able to actually copy my card for Dipper with this. The downside of the clones is that whenever they become the target of a spell or ability, you have to sacrifice them. This is a reference to the main weakness of the Dipper clones that we see in the episode. They start to essentially disintegrate as soon as they come into contact with any type of liquid, meaning they're pretty easy to take out. This card is incredibly powerful in a format like Commander, where there's a bunch of different upkeeps for this to trigger on, and you're almost always going to have a legendary creature to target being your commander. So it really works with commanders that benefit a lot from having multiple copies of them on the battlefield. So something like Joda the Unifier, Yarok the Desecrated, or Adrix and Neb Twin Casters can be insane with this card. Then finally we have Stan, Mr. Mystery, a 3/4 legendary human for blue-red, and at the beginning of each upkeep you may have target non-creature artifact you control become a 2/2 artifact illusion token until end of turn, and it has, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability or blocks a creature, sacrifice it, and then make 2 treasure tokens. Stan is Mabel and Dipper's great uncle, and he's in charge of watching them for the summer. He also runs the Mystery Shack, a store that is full of a bunch of crummy fake attractions about mysteries and monsters that Stan has made up in order to sell to the citizens of Gravity Falls. To represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so Stan can animate non-creature artifacts at the beginning of each upkeep, turning them into illusions. Then I also made these illusion tokens sacrifice themselves and make 2 treasures whenever they become the target of a spell or ability or block a creature. The idea being that if they're ever blocking something or they become the target of something, it's supposed to represent a customer looking at it, and the treasure tokens you make off of it are supposed to be the money that Stan would make from said customer. If you wanted to build around Stan, I think he works well with artifacts that you want to die, so it's a little bit harder for your opponents to swing into you because you get a lot of benefit from them dying. So stuff like Ichor Wellspring, Mycosynth Wellspring, or Ugin's Nexus can be pretty strong with him. He also works great with treasure synergies since they also feed back into his first ability, since you can target them because they're non-creature. So if you wanted to double up the treasures he makes off of them, you can run stuff like Zorn, you can get more tokens off of stuff like Academy Manufactor, or you can turn your treasures into card advantage with Professional Facebreaker. If you enjoyed this video, you should check out this video right over here where I made custom Magic the Gathering cards based on regular show.